Welcome to the Inspire to Invest podcast, where we're sharing inspiring stories from business owners, entrepreneurs, and real estate investors on the pursuit of wealth and financial freedom. This episode of the Inspire to Invest podcast has been brought to you by Knightsbridge Foreign Exchange. Hey everybody, welcome to Inspire to Invest. I've got Elizabeth Kelly here from Elizabeth Kelly Consulting. She joins us today from Toronto. She's a seasoned entrepreneur and business coach with more than a decade of experience guiding aspiring and established business owners. A former top trainer for Rich Dad Canada, Elizabeth has coached thousands on strategic planning, investment, and entrepreneurship. Lots of big words in there. Since 2005, she has founded successful ventures, including the largest residential housing provider in Kirkland Lake, Ontario. And now Elizabeth focuses on personalized coaching to help entrepreneurs build resilient businesses, create new cash flow streams, and achieve financial and geographic freedom. So thanks for taking time out of your busy day to be here today. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. And thanks so much for the invitation to join you. I love what you are doing for the real estate community, and it's amazing. I feel like it's wonderful to have more women in the space. When I started 20 years ago, there was an awful lot more guys, and there weren't as many women to, sort of look up to and emulate. And I appreciate you for being one of the cheerleaders in our community.
Yeah, and I think it's a big part when it comes to like empowerment and just showing that there are other opportunities and options for people that may have only thought at one point in time they could only go down one path. Now, to get started for where your journey began, can you share about the catalyst into real estate and kind of where your career kicked off and, where that transition happened along the way?
Sure. My background is actually in fundraising and event coordination, not for profit. So
Okay.
literally nothing to do with what I do now.
Yeah.
But I always felt like there was something more. I always struggled to kind of fit into a corporate culture. I had a lot of trouble doing things that didn't feel right to me when I was asked to compromise my values and my ethics. I spent a long time thinking there was something wrong with me and I just couldn't get with the program. And then when I discovered real estate investing, it's like everything kind of clicked. And my husband and I had a goal of being able to build this passive portfolio for when we retired. And it didn't take too long before we got to the point where I could leave my job and just focus full time on growing the businesses. We founded a property management company. I started a rent to own company. And then I sort of transitioned as so we took courses with Rich Dad, and that really helped us get the basics, get the foundation set up. And then as they kind of saw our growth, they asked us to come back, and they asked me originally it was guest presentations, and then I became a trainer, and then it just kind of everything blew up from there. So
Yeah, that's
it
pretty
was
exciting.
a kind of a wild and crazy time, but I wouldn't change anything for
Yeah,
where
no,
I
that's
am now.
amazing. So in terms of where you got started, I know you talked just lightly about, some of your portfolio growth, but can you talk about maybe what those first couple of properties look like and what your portfolio looks like today?
So, when we first started buying real estate before we were educated, we were buying single family homes. We bought some townhouses. We bought like seven condos. I mean, we were doing the right thing completely the wrong way, at least for how I view things now.
Yeah.
And so we started taking our courses with Rich Dad and we went, oh, this is what we're supposed to do. So then we started looking at markets. We bought, grew to, I guess, about maybe close to 50 units in St. John, New Brunswick. And then we started buying in Kirkland Lake, Ontario, and we were buying apartment buildings. And then at the same time, I was doing rent to owns as well. So generally, I wouldn't buy single families or even duplexes unless I was doing a rent to own or a flip or something like that. But it kind of enabled us to take the portfolio that we had before we were educated and utilize the strategies we'd learned to roll it over into exit strategies so that we could take those funds that were tied up and not performing well, redeploy them into the multifamily space. And we grew really quickly because back then in 2010, it was easy. We were buying apartment buildings with 5% down, and they paid a lot more attention to the cash flow and what was being created. Qualifying was a lot easier back then.
Yeah. Now, since you are based in Ontario, how have you found
Mhm.
the process being, a remote landlord, so to speak? I'm sure you've got boots on the ground and stuff like that.
Well, it's funny because we started our property management company because we went through a couple of different property managers and we weren't finding that our tenants were being managed the way that we wanted them to. We wanted to take, sort of the Toronto rental experience and bring it to smaller communities. And what we found is that the easiest way to do that was to actually hire employees. And that was
Yeah.
why we started our management company. And then we figured out that no matter how much we train people, that you really have to have more involvement than we originally envisioned. So in 2017, I I moved up to Kirkland Lake full time, and I was there for 5 years running the property management company, managing my buildings. And then by 2022, my ignoring my health had caught up with me. So then I decided, okay, I needed a couple of surgeries, so I moved back down to the Toronto area and we closed our property management company. We simplified life a lot. We sold off some of the challenging assets, some of the things that were really management heavy. And
Yeah.
so we're actually down. We probably sold about 75% of our portfolio, and we're just down to some of the ones. I have a commercial building that I adore, that I manage myself, that is absolutely, it's so rewarding, but everything I've kept is more like a business and less like a just a pure real estate investment. I have to be able to make money in more ways than just charging residential rate for me to keep it in my portfolio now.
Now, when you talk about things being management heavy, is that just because
Mm.
it's the tenants and toilets and just the nature of the fact that it was an apartment or something like that? Or was there something else about those specific assets that would have been more like arduous than like other things that you had?
Well, at that point, we're at like 400 units. So that means that there is a lot involved with that. So you require a certain level of staffing. We started a construction company. So we were doing some pretty big renovation projects, both to our buildings and then to other buildings that we were managing for other investors.
Yeah.
Um, I think looking back, I was I was wonderfully optimistic about the amount of time and energy, required to manage properties yourself.
Yeah.
So definitely, if you are envisioning passive or hands off, you need a property manager who's going to do that heavy lifting for you. And because we then became the ones doing the heavy lifting for everyone else, including ourselves, suddenly it was a lot more than we thought it would be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the thing. I think if you're going to scale, you don't want to bite out more than you can chew. And I think, we've talked about it in the past to some of the distress happening in our community. And I think that's, there's a combination of things. Like sometimes people could be collateral damage, but sometimes they decided to scale too quickly. Work wasn't getting done. Things fell behind. That leads to vacancies. That leads to insolvency issues and stuff like that, right? So I think, depending on what your plans are and what your needs are, you just want to make sure that you're moving in phases so that you're not taking on too much all at once, or, you're going to be left with nothing.
Yeah. And I think you have to build in a certain margin. Like, when we start out on these journeys, typically we have, the best of intentions, and it's, we believe that things will work out. And when we were getting mortgages in 2010, everything was great. But it comes up to renewal in 2015 and you're in a different place and financing's in a different place. And you need to make sure that you have projected far enough in the future that, what are the type of challenges that could arise and what
Yeah.
do I need to do to mitigate that kind of risk? And I think we go in with the best of intentions, but sometimes it almost creates like this belief that there will never be challenges or we will never lose money. And quite honestly, there's a lot of people saying I've never lost money. And you and I both know that if you haven't lost money,
It just
you
hasn't
are
happened yet.
very, very lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
knowing what you know now, if you could go back and change anything, like, is there anything that you would have done differently about that path? Like maybe not taking on as many buildings or looking at some different asset classes?
I think I would have been a lot more strategic. Um, So we bought in the communities that we bought in because we were looking for cash flow. Specifically, we wanted to create that cash flow for me to leave my job and for my husband to eventually leave his job. And what we didn't realize was that when you are buying for cash flow, and we realize this in hindsight, but what it means is typically you're buying in a market where there is little to no appreciation year over year. And you're typically buying buildings that are in a somewhat distressed state. So if your pockets are not deep enough where you can take those buildings, do the renovations and repairs, take care of that deferred maintenance, then you almost end up buying something that will just every time you turn around, there's another bill. Every time you turn around, there's, plumbing that needs to be addressed, or there's foundation, or there's roof,
Yeah.
or there's whatever it is. You need to have, if you're going to go for those cash flowing buildings, you need to have the deeper pockets to bring them up to a certain standard right from the beginning, because otherwise you're always trying to play catch up.
Yeah. Now, did you guys do this on your own or did you involve other investors or joint venture partners?
We bought the first kind of chunks on our own. Most of New Brunswick was on our own, and then some of the ones in Kirkland Lake. But you kind of reach a point where you're not able to qualify anymore.
Yeah.
So we definitely did bring in partners over time. And then with my rent to own company, I always worked with partners as well. Um, I found it just gave you the ability or the opportunity to be able to grow so much faster.
Yeah.
But just because you can doesn't mean you should. I think you touched on something really important earlier when you said, growing too quickly. There's a lot of people who, they haven't even closed on a building and they've already moved on to the next one. They haven't set up the systems and the processes, which is kind of what I'm really dedicated to now, which is if you want to scale, that's amazing. Put the systems and processes in place first and then
Yeah.
test them as you grow. Don't try and look backwards to recreate something that should have been created before you even closed on a property.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that makes perfect sense. And I think when it comes down to it, a lot of these companies didn't have the appropriate foundation set up, right? So that's why it's
Mhm.
led to these collapses and stuff like that. It's, so unfortunate because there is so much collateral damage and distress and damage that it's caused. So I think when you are involving other people, you just want to be really conservative and conscientious about how you're moving forward.
Extra diligent. Yeah.
Now, what would
And
you
I think
say? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think a lot of the challenge has come from money churn. And so money churn is you buy a building, you put, money into the renovations and repairs, get it rented, get some tenants in there, get the money coming in, refinance and move on to the next one. And
Yeah.
I think as it's gotten harder and harder and harder to qualify for financing, the speed that money can churn has slowed. And a lot of people have not fully embraced that or brought safeguards into their businesses when they're managing other people's money. If it's your money, do whatever you want. But the second you take on money for other people, you need to have all these safeguards in place. You can't, it shouldn't be the Wild West.
Yeah, yeah. I did another podcast, and that's what we were kind of talking about. And I think just based on, some of the circumstances that have arisen in the last year, it's just really been eye-opening, not only just the state of what's been happening, but just politically, how
Mhm.
things are structured. And I really do think that there needs to be changes because for some of the things that have occurred, like if the same thing happened in the United States, like people would be going to jail for a long time. So, for whatever
Absolutely.
reason, there's no appetite to pursue white collar crimes. And what I think I've come to accept now is like you get in more trouble for a traffic violation than mishandling $20 million. So it's
Yeah.
really, really unfortunate because it has devastated so many people.
Yeah. And I think, when you are heading in a new direction, like for us, when we moved from, as I said, my background, my husband's an engineer, and, we moved into property management and running our businesses,
Yeah.
you really have to take stock of what your transferable skills are and what the gaps are. Because
Yeah.
there are so many people who went from doing, whatever they were doing into being entrepreneurs and running a real estate business and raising capital. And there was not a lot of consideration for, hey, if I'm not a financial person, if I don't have a financial background, I need to put a guardrail in place, which is somebody who is an expert in finances and will absolutely keep an eye on the numbers because I don't really know what that looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's very, very important. Now, when you look at things that you're most proud of or your biggest successes, what would you say, was your kind of shining moment when you look at all the different things that you've been through?
Um, I mean, I've learned a lot in my own, but I'm always a lot more proud of what my clients achieve. It's kind of funny. I feel like I don't know. I feel like I don't have kids, but it's what I would imagine a mom feels like. When you see your kids achieve things, when you've done the right thing and you've helped them and you've coached them and you've supported them. I love when my clients buy new buildings. I'm always way more excited for them than I ever was. My husband would be like, "Oh, we have an accepted offer on an 18 unit." I'm like, "Great," and you just kind of add it to the process, and everything goes.
Yeah.
But for each of my clients, seeing them when they send me the message and they're like, hey, I'm drafting my email to retire from my job, what do you think of this, and being able to celebrate with them afterwards, that's the stuff that means more to me, I think, because real estate to me is a means to an end. It gives me the ability to have an impact on the world, to build my legacy, but it is not, if I never had to get another quote to replace a roof, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think you'd be the only one that would be content with that. We're just going to take a
Yeah.
really brief break for a word from our sponsors and we'll be right back. I make tens of thousands of dollars selling my vacation rental in Florida. If you love to travel or spend your winter somewhere warmer, then this video is for you. From 2013 to 2017, I owned a vacation rental property in Florida, and I bought it at the perfect time when the dollar was par. When I sold the property in 2017, the majority of my profit actually came from the currency exchange. When I bought the property, the dollar was 1-to-1. I bought it 1-to-1, but when I sold, the Canadian dollar had dropped significantly, so I made thousands of dollars simply from the currency exchange. If you're buying a property, relocating, or just have to send some money down south to cover some expenses, don't use the bank. They're going to take a huge cut. Knightsbridge FX gives you much better rates to save you money and potentially profit when the markets turn in your favor. Check out Knightsbridge FX and save hundreds or even thousands of dollars the next time that you have currency to exchange. Inspired to Invest is proud to support the Beyond Success program. In today's complex world, it's absolutely crucial for our youth to learn how to take charge of their financial future. We believe that every young person deserves access to accurate, practical financial information. Designed to bridge the gap, the Beyond Success program leverages a comprehensive educational bootcamp to equip young minds with essential financial literacy skills. At Beyond Success, it's not just about teaching financial literacy, it's also about fostering a foundation for a prosperous and empowered future. Join us. Together we can build a brighter financial future for the next generations. Join us. Together we can build a brighter financial future for the next generations. I value transparency, integrity, and trust. If you choose to work with me, you can be assured that business will be conducted honestly and openly. Time is of the essence in this industry, so you can expect nothing short of quick, clear communication from me. I'll keep you informed every step of the way so you feel comfortable throughout this entire process. Our homes are where we eat, sleep, relax, and play. My clients' best interests are at the heart of everything I do. And with this said, my service to you doesn't end when the transaction does. As your realtor, I'll not only help you buy and sell your property, I'll also educate and support you along the way. I want to help you fulfill your goal of home ownership and become your trusted real estate resource for life. I can't wait to share my passion for real estate with you. More importantly, to find you the perfect house to turn into your home. Looking to buy, sell, or invest in Durham Region or Toronto? Let's chat. Hey everybody, welcome back to Inspired to Invest. I've got Elizabeth Kelly here with me, and we're talking about how they built a pretty sizable portfolio and then have also worked on scaling it back to focus on other things like coaching clients. And we were talking about, just how you really find fulfillment in helping your clients find success, which is something I'm a big believer in. I do think that we rise by lifting others, so I really love that approach. Now, in terms of crazy things that have happened, I'm sure just having the magnitude of the portfolio that you did, what's the craziest thing that you've ever encountered as a real estate investor or as a business owner?
Well, I mean, there's the crazy, not in a good way. Like when we were doing property management, we had a couple of big fires, and those do have a tremendous impact on a lot of people. So you're dealing with an awful lot of different things. It challenges
Yeah.
you. In terms of the craziest, I would say it would be a tie between I had a rent to own where unfortunately my tenant buyer had some mental health challenges, and when we went to do an inspection there was a pig living in the house. Not like a cute little pot-bellied pig, but like a giant barn sow, 300 pounds, not very nice, 400 pounds kind of pig.
I'm kind of
Um,
smiling because my dad had a house pig. So,
they can be cute,
well,
but
they're
this was
apparently
not.
smarter
This
than
was
dogs, right?
mean.
But eventually he
Yeah.
had to relocate it because I guess the pig got lazy and didn't go outside to pee and it peed. That's not a little bit. So he
No.
got relocated at that point after a few years in the house, and it's kind of a funny circumstance.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't what I was intending, and there was no effort for the
Like,
pig to
oh,
go outside. The pig was unfortunately
hello.
living in the mudroom full time.
Yeah,
And then I discovered that there's pig sanctuaries and all kinds of, you just learn a lot, right? Everything's a learning
yeah,
opportunity.
yeah.
The other one was when we traded someone a house for a car.
Hmm.
And that was kind of, it's way easier to get financing for a car than it is for a house.
Yeah,
And we would do that again if we had the opportunity, for sure.
yeah. That's so interesting. What would you say are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned along the way? I know we were talking about some of them before the break, but is there anything else that you think is something that, pearl of wisdom that you could pass down to someone else that's starting out?
The number one thing I would suggest is the importance of education because you will make a lot of decisions that feel really easy when you don't know what you need to know to make the right decisions. So before you start buying, you need to know how to evaluate a market. You need to know how to determine your own level of risk tolerance. You need to understand the ins and outs of the different investment strategies. Apartment building investing, everybody touts it as like this is the be all and the end all of the real estate space. The reality is it's not going to be a fit for everybody.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure you have fully educated yourself on the benefits and the drawbacks of each of the different aspects. You know how to run your numbers, you know how to build a team, you know how to manage a property manager, all these different aspects of it. It's much easier. You're going to learn some lessons along the way, but the more you can put into building a solid foundation to build your business on, the second you buy a piece of investment property, you're not just an investor, you're an entrepreneur. You need to
Yeah.
know how to run a business. If you don't have good interpersonal skills, if you don't have sales skills, if you don't have financial skills, you need to beef up in those areas or bring in
Yeah.
someone who's going to help you with those pieces.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now, obviously, you kind of went on this journey where you guys were building up, 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 and then you
Mhm,
sold off some of your assets. So, what would you
mhm.
say is next for you? Like, what would be your focus maybe for the next 10 or 20 years?
I'm focusing on real estate type businesses. So I have a couple of vacation or retirement type properties with multiple, ways that you can make money. I still have my big commercial building where I have people, it's sort of a short-term rental space, but I also have commercial tenants in there. So I'm looking at how to take buildings like that and how to optimize the function and bring as much money out of it as a business as possible. I'm
Yeah.
looking at other businesses as well. I help a lot of my clients found businesses. So whether they're in property management or bookkeeping or grant writing or staging or whatever it is, a lot of them are real estate kind of adjacent,
Yeah.
but there's so much opportunity out there. It's just a question of making sure that you are prepared and you know what to expect. Sometimes people don't have the bandwidth to take on more, but
Yeah.
matching your needs and expectations with what you bring to the table, it's hard to go wrong.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I mean, even in our business, it's like, you always have those ebbs and flows, right? Like you don't want to overhire to accommodate the work coming in, but you never want to say no because the client that comes to you with something small could come along with something really big next time. And if you can't handle it, you're going to lose those future opportunities, right? So it's all just trying to make sure that you don't overpromise and underdeliver and you can, scale appropriately and scale back if you need to, but it's all yeah, just trying to feel things out as you go.
Yeah. And I think you have to, a lot of times as real estate investors, we have a tendency to want to save money. So we might not want to hire a lawyer or we might not want to hire an accountant for their opinion or, we might want to try and do our bookkeeping ourselves. These are things where you need to find the right people and pay for their expertise because in the
Yeah,
long run it's going to save you a ton. Any contract you're signing, you should be taking it to a lawyer to review. Anytime you're preparing for taxes, you should be talking to an experienced bookkeeper and you should be
yeah,
hiring a good accountant to file your taxes for you. There is those are should be considered investments and not a waste of money when you're
yeah,
growing and
agreed.
learning.
I've had the same account now for 11 years, and I'm like, please don't ever leave me. Because I had, one for 3 years, one for 3 years, and like, they kind of move along for different reasons, but he's been great. But to your point about the lawyers, like, I think that's one thing I would want to add is not only just having a lawyer review something, but making sure it's also the right lawyer that's looking at it through the right lens. And I think that's something that looking back, I did have a real estate lawyer look over certain things in the beginning.
Hmm.
And now, like, kind of years later, I'm realizing like I should have received other guidance or input from a professional, like legal standpoint. And maybe if I'd had
Hmm.
a litigation lawyer look at something or another second opinion, I could have received very, very different advice. And so that's actually very frustrating because I did pay the lawyer for that. I did think I was doing the right thing, but just one person could have shifted my perspective with certain things and it could have made the world of difference, right? So I think just making sure that lawyers are not a one size fits all and a real estate lawyer dealing with like residential transactions or even like a business lawyer may not necessarily be skilled to see things in a certain way, the way a litigation lawyer might look at something, right?
That's such a great point. And writing contracts, that is an art. And every lawyer will tell you that they can write contracts, but just because they can doesn't mean they should. So, especially when you are signing someone else's contracts, know and understand that those contracts are written
To
to the
protect them,
best
not
for
you.
the best slant of the person whose contract you're signing.
Yeah.
So I agree with you 100% there. And honestly, I've learned those lessons too. Those are the hardest lessons to learn, the ones where we look back and go, what could I or should I have done differently? And you believe you've done everything right in the moment, and then you look back and go, oh, I didn't see that gap.
Yeah. Trust me, I see the
Yeah.
gap now. In terms of how real estate investing has changed your life, what do you think life would look like if you guys hadn't gone down this path?
I think I'd be stuck at a job. I think I would continue to have been unhappy and at someone else's mercy in terms of what my schedule looks like. Right now my in-laws are in a home and my husband travels a lot. I have tremendous freedom. My husband, my father-in-law was in the emergency room last night, so I didn't have to phone anyone and say, "Hey, I had a terrible sleep. I'm not at my best. Can I like work tomorrow?" So I move my own schedule. I have tremendous freedom. I also have a lot of freedom over my income and what happens with it and my scheduling. I'm thinking about taking a month off in June to travel. I don't have to ask anyone about that.
Yeah. Yeah, and
I
I think really
can
at the
work
end of the
from
day, real
home.
estate is just the vehicle, right? So,
It
it's
is.
not the end goal. And I think that's what people always want to keep in mind. And it's not the only way that you can achieve that. It is one way, but there are other
Mhm.
things you can do like buying businesses or other investment strategies. And you just have to really look at what you're trying to gain from it, right? Now, obviously, the name of this podcast is Inspired to Invest. So I always like to ask my guests if they've got a particular quote that motivates or inspires them.
I knew you were going to ask that, and I do have one that's one of my favorites. I'm just going to look it up for you to make sure that I get it right. If you wait until you're 100% ready, you'll never take action. And so many people, it's like driving to the mall and they wait for every single light on the way to go green. It's, well, I want to do this, but and they're just waiting and waiting and waiting. And there is a difference between, taking reckless action and doing your best, but still having the confidence to take the leap and jump off the cliff. And I think there's opportunity for a lot more people out there to become entrepreneurs and investors if they get comfortable with the idea of being just that little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, for anyone that's interested in learning more about, your journey in real estate or your coaching business, what's the best way for them to find you?
You can find me on Instagram or on Facebook, Elizabeth Kelly Consulting.
Awesome. So I'll include that in the show notes below. Of course, thanks for taking time out of your schedule to be with us for today. For anyone that is watching or listening, if you have enjoyed this episode, please make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. You can also follow along with us on social at Inspired to Invest Podcast. And remember, when you invest in yourself, the sky's the limit. Thanks again. Thank you to Knightsbridge Foreign Exchange for bringing you this episode of Inspired to Invest. The views represented on this podcast are for general information only and does not constitute investment or other professional advice or an offering of securities. The host and guests featured on Inspired to Invest make no representations as to the performance of any particular investment. Should you decide to make an investment, you are responsible for conducting your own review and analysis. It is recommended that you obtain independent legal, accounting, and tax advice from licensed professionals.